A new millennium, a new football? Not quite. 2002 saw the final primacy of three at the back in World Cups, with both finalists, Brazil and Germany, employing a form of 3-4-1-2, and the exciting Argentina, who departed during the group stages despite playing well, playing a form that could be described as a 3-3-2-2. The use of 3-4-1-2, or some form thereof, derived from two elements: the predominance of 4-4-2 among more functional, less talented sides, and the need to find room for a creator behind the strikers who could play between the lines of an opposition 3-4-1-2 or 4-4-2 without sacrificing defensive stability. Argentina's approach was perhaps the most idiosyncratic, featuring a holding midfielder flanked by wing-backs with a sort of magic square ahead. The holder screened a back three of stoppers while the wing-backs marked opposition-wide midfielders. The attacking midfield two created and the two strikers finished. That at least was the theory. As Jonathan Wilson says, Argentina had more possession and created more chances than any team in the group stages. They went home having only scored 2 goals. Brazil, the eventual winners in the final against Germany, had a more prosaic division. Effectively a 7-3, which lined up as a 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-1-2 with 3 defenders, one of whom, Edmilson, played as a sweeper or like an old-fashioned Brazilian cortozagueiro, stepping out if required and starting counter-attacks. Ahead of them, 2 screening midfielders sat and spoiled. It should be noted though that they started the tournament with the more creative Juninho playing deeper but dropped him for increased solidity. They were flanked by 2 superb wingbacks, Cafu and Roberto Carlos, who could play anywhere from fullback to wing. This 7 protected, disrupted, won the ball and provided some width for the 3, the wonderfully talented Ronaldo, Rivaldo and Ronaldinho. The latter tended to drop off more towards the midfield axis. Ronaldo acted as a spearhead and Rivaldo floated into space out wide. As Michael Cox has noted, despite a feeling that Brazil are best playing highly fluid creative samba football, in recent tournaments they have been most successful when they play a relatively rigid shape defensively that allows 2 or 3 of their flair players to express themselves without the worry that their failings will cost the team defensively. That's a very neat summary of the best aspects of the 3-4-1-2 as well though. As ever, width can be an issue for teams without the quality of Cafu and Roberto Carlos. Germany's more pedestrian version of the formation had to account for that, and they used a midfield 4 that was industrious without being spectacular but achieved a degree of fluidity going forwards because left midfielder Marco Bode was more attacking while right midfielder Thorsten Frings tucked in alongside Jens Jeremies and Didi Hamann. Ahead of the destructive Jeremies, Hamann and Frings trio, Bode pushed up on the left and Michael Ballack or Bird Schneider drifted out from the hole to the right or doubled up on the left, while Oliver Neuville was a linking forward who dropped off behind the out-and-out finisher Miroslav Klose. It was another take on the 3-4-1-2 that created a form of asymmetry, with Germany at times resembling a 3-3-2-2 as well, but with a greater width further forward than Argentina had managed. It was not enough to unseat the Brazilians though, who won the final 2-0 with both goals coming from Ronaldo, the tournament's top scorer and finest player. By 2006, however, back threes were largely dead and buried. Raymond Domenic's France used a 4-2-3-1 of the most classic form, a holding midfielder and box-to-box midfield axis, a back 4 with fullbacks who could push up and wingers who could play in or out, flanking a pure 10 with a 9 ahead of him. Of course the 9 was Thierry Henry, far from the classic striker. While Henry could finish, he also had the intelligence and ability to drop off or pull wide, which, added to Zidane's creativity and the acceleration and dribbling of Franck Ribéry and Florent Malouda out wide, made France's front 4 fearsome. The aim of the 4-2-3-1 was to give a solid basis from which 4 players could attack, while making up for the lack of width that the back 3 formations had often encountered. The back 4 with a screening midfield axis gave this solidity and allowed fullbacks to push on, while the use of a 10 behind the lone striker allowed the side to carry a purely creative player, especially if the wingers took on some defensive duties. Italy, interestingly, played with a version of the 4-4-2, but one that was vertically lopsided. Francesco Totti played as a second striker behind Luca Toni, dropping deep into midfield or wide, but also capable of feeding off Toni for shooting opportunities. The central midfield pairing saw the finals man of the match Andrea Pirlo play alongside Gennaro Gattuso. But while Gattuso harried and pressed, Pirlo dropped off, deeper towards the centre-backs to spray passes from behind the halfway line. In effect, Italy played a 4-1-3-1-1, but the wide midfielders did play with enough width to make the formation look like a 4-4-2 at times. This was permitted by the industry of Gattuso. Italy effectively had two playmakers, Pirlo and Totti, but of very different sorts, and the team's balance only worked because of the blend of players available to Marcello Lippi. The final, which was won on penalties after Zinedine Zidane was famously sent off for absolutely leathering Marco Materazzi, saw two sides whose setups largely negated each other despite the surplus of genuine football geniuses on the pitch. The flat back four was back, after a decade or so of unpopularity. Central midfield was largely now a place of ball winners and shuttlers, however otherwise talented they were, like Patrick Vieira. And creativity was about finding space in the hole behind the striker, either as a 10 or a second striker. Pressing had closed the options, but the winger returned, albeit in a more flexible and defensively minded mode. The next advances were to be more stylistic than formational. As we will see next time, but football was clearly becoming the form we recognise today.